So the Bernie Mac used to have this get he did. Bernie Mac would go, and then the boy came down the stairs, and the boy he's a homosexual, and this boy say, I said, what are you doing? And the boy say, get milk and cookies, milk and cookies, and that's what the song kind of about. Little Johnny's stealing sugar, so he goes ha ha ha, and then you can't see this in the video, but he's actually does have some sugar in his mouth. Perry is lying. He's saying he didn't eat any sugar. So I don't know. I don't know about David. As they say, he had a very close relationship with Jonathan. Jonathan and him, they loved each other very much, and some have theorized that that means a certain kind of thing about his orientation, but I'm not really go there. I'm not really go there. But he did have an incident, Jonathan, where his father, it kind of like it say with Yepta, Jeff, uh, and I think it was Judges where he says, "Oh, I'm a sacrifice the first thing I see." It was his own daughter, and this has a lot to do with the old sacrificial system, the old giving way into the new, is where I lean. That which could never take away sins, something of God, how much more would the sacrifice of God uh, be to take away sins? But nonetheless, I wanted to talk about the old and the new, and this honey, because Saul had said about Jonathan, he would kill anyone he's seen eat of the honey, and then through divination or clairvoyancy, he had deciphered. They had these implements called the the Urim and the Thummim or whatever that they could. You see this in they did this even in the New Testament. Not that, but see, that's what you got to understand about the New Testament. This was in Acts 1. Peter didn't get the Spirit till Acts 2, when they cast lots to see whom would replace the disciple or apostle named Judas Iscariot, or Judas the Sicarii. And when it comes to the honey, we see something similar way back in Judges. Again, back in Judges. Now, just like in Acts 1, you're going to get the good, the bad, and the ugly. If they don't have the Spirit yet, then who is to say what the author is trying to indicate here? Because we see time and time again throughout the New Testament, Jesus was basically telling his disciples, "You ain't ready. My cup, the cup of staggering." Like, I mean, even in his flesh, Jesus was the kind of like, crying tears, like, I can't take this cup, but he had to resign to, like Isaac, be bound and sacrificed. And so, when it comes to Samson, the strong man, who you could see a parallel as like Heracles in the Greeks. And you're going to have the good and the bad, the ugly. Me personally, call me crazy, but I would conjecture that the story of Samson is a Jewish source. Like, I've seen scholars that say that the earlier sources, that Joshua is older than Deuteronomy, and the Deuteronomists, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. You're dealing with First Kings, Second Kings, lots of Isaiah. You're dealing with lots of things in there, but you have Joshua being before that. And I mean, you can even see. I would go as far as to say lots of Numbers was along with Deuteronomy, because you see them trying to roll back this Levitical order, to put the prophet over the priest, and you see them kind of talking about the second covenant on the other side of the mountain. Um, you have the making of Caleb, the Kenizzite, as a Judahite. But I want to talk about the Judahites. Like, you go back to the story of Joshua. I'm sorry, Joseph, and Joseph being a figure of Christ, being sold by Judah, and so you have Judah Iscariot, right? If I may, selling Jesus. And then you have here in Judges 15, it says, "And the men of Judah said, 'Why have you come up against us?' They said, 'We have come up to bind Samson to do.'" So this is Judah saying they come to bind Samson. Then 3,000 of the men of Judah went down the cleft of the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Do you not know the Philistines are rulers over us?" Let me reiterate. Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is that? What then is this that you have done to us? He said to them, "As you did to me, so I have done to them." And they said to him, "Why have you come down to bind? We have come down to bind you, that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines." And Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves." And they said, "No, no, we will only bind you and give them into your hands. We will surely not kill you." And mind you, this is after he had just rounded up, what was it, 3,000 foxes, and tied them tail to tail with firebrands, or whatever you call those, the torches between the tails, and ran through the city and wreaked havoc. And the spirit rushed upon him, and he gets super strength. I mean, if you want to see how much strength he had, um, I mean, not even to mention these 1,000 men he took down by himself, but you see, he goes into Gaza. It says Samson went into Gaza, and he saw a prostitute, and he went in unto her. And remember Judah, the patriarch, he was trying to go in unto one, and lo and behold, it was his daughter by marriage, his daughter-in-law, who was supposed to be the wife of his son, but he was trying to preserve his son. So you see a lot of this in the Judahite literature, and Deuteronomy has parts that are post-exilic, so it makes one wonder, especially with the narrative of losing the temple and everything, being part of the curses, and losing the land and everything. This cursing is with the knowledge of Lamentations and things like that. It's not. It's like usually when things are going good, they don't really see how God's still there in the bad. So let me just show you how strong Samson was. So they said they were going to surround the place where he was with this woman in Gaza, or what is it in Kez? I think it's Kez in Hebrew. But so he's in Gaza, and here it says they were gonna hem him in, and he wouldn't be able to leave, and then they'd have him because he just likes these women here, apparently. Because if you go back to the couple chapters, he was married to one of them, and he gave him this riddle. That's what I was saying about the honey. I mean, he says this riddle: out of the eater came to eat, out of the strong something sweet, and the rest is history. I mean, this he fed it to his parents and tell them where he got it. But here his father-in-law gave him to his best man, gave his wife to his best man, and he said, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found my riddle. And this has to do with this sort of blessing of progeny that they had gone back. Whoever wrote Genesis 1 had wrote back into all of the ancient Israelite traditions this idea of blessing being in progeny. And so you have these endless genealogies that are likely coming from Ezra and that later additions, and this may be somehow tied into adding things into Exodus, even where you have Exodus 13, is it? I'm sorry. So this is most of my thesis is really tied around this verse. I think I mentioned it in my other in my last video. So it says right here in Exodus 11, verse 4, thus says the Lord, at about midnight I will go in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sits on the throne, even the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, the firstborn of the cattle. And you have consecration of the firstborn in Exodus 13. And it's right here that for the Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed the firstborn of the land of Egypt, that both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals, therefore a sacrifice to the Lord. All the males that first opened the womb of the matrix, and the sons of all my firstborn sons I will redeem. It shall be a mark upon your head. But if you look at the prior verse, it says, and in this time your son shall ask, what does this mean? It said, by the strong hand who he brought us out of Egypt. For when the Lord suddenly refused him, he killed the firstborn, or he sacrificed the firstborn. And you have this idea of something dying so you may live, and this gets into the whole barbecue system of the Levitical order. And the priests were getting fat eating these best cuts. The original man didn't even do this. Like, they were cultivating crops, I think, before they even were cultivating the animals. And so you have Cain, who was doing something inferior, and supposedly he was jealous. So you have these people with knives and herds um, being like Abraham and then living in tents. All these things very much reminiscent of the fall of man and the first homicide. And um, you have people like David who dwelled in tents and played instruments, and like the harp and the lyre. And you have these herdsmen, these Semitic herdsmen, going way into even Africa, which is crazy. And if you don't receive that, you're going to miss a lot of the history. Because I've talked in my prior videos about the Gabel Iraq knife, and so in my last video I was talking about how there was a certain Egyptians that were his people and stuff, but that's not to say that all Egyptians were his people, because um, the thing is that the Egyptians were taken over before the Bible was written by the Greeks, by the Cretans and all the seafaring sea peoples, right? So these people are there long before any of this takes place, so much so that they anachronistically put Philistines in the time of Abraham. So that's not that far back, because they weren't there at the time, especially post-exilic. I mean, when you talk about post-exilic, you're talking about well over 1,000 years later, in a time when they don't have the internet, right? Come on. So it's very obscure, like a lot of our history, we've just been figuring out recently through just the most um, extraordinary scholarship in terms of temporally. I mean, it's just so many leaps and bounds above which had been before. Like, it's really amazing and fantastic how they have rebuilt chronologies by cataloging and categorizing these different sagas that have unfolded through time and chronicling them. So when it comes to the protection, the hedge of protection and stuff, like, that is something that we see as part of the narrative, but it's not the entire narrative. Because the idea of the remnant, because you got to understand that Ezra, being who he thought was a direct descendant, he thought he should get a special status. I mean, especially being a Levite and everything, like, he really would take this idea of being a native born and running with it. And so this is like what it says in the Quran, that they say Ezra is the son of God. But I've talked about this a lot in my other videos, that wherever they are is where God is. And so this idea of being son of God, we can see explicitly mentioned in Hosea and everything. And so this idea exists biblically that those on the outside are beasts. Like, when you go to did I ever finish his super strength? It says, but Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he rose and took hold of the doors to the gates of the city and the two posts, and pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders. This is the city. He put the city on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron. You got to understand that the inheritance is um about a lot about land and whatnot have you in the Old Testament, that is. So it says in Job, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves, and Satan came up, and uh, God said to Satan, look at, there's nobody like Job, and Satan was accusing him. Does Job fear God for no reason? And remember, Joshua was accused too, but he was clean, washed it. Apparently, because I mean, he killed so many Canaanites that in a sort of Isaiah 63 form, like that, washed in the sacrifice of the other, so others die so we can live and and I'm going to show you in Isaiah where they're considered like beasts. And so it says, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him? So that's contrary to what I said earlier. This is kind of with the hedge, because this is like Judah. Judah in the time of Hezekiah was destroyed, and of course Israel was. So this is the sacrifice of the firstborn. But the Judahites don't see themselves as Israelites. The Israelites, they see as Samaritans. So remember in Ezra 4, and also in First Esdras, with a parallel verse, they have this idea that the Samaritans were trying to work with them, and now have you, that they were not considered neighbors. But who is a neighbor, said the Lord? Though who showed this man brotherly love? Was it the Levite or the priest? No, it was the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan. And they had gone through a town of the Samaritans, and the Lord did not tell them to, as they wanted to, call down fire from heaven on them. And he told the Samaritan woman in John 4, the Lord said, you shall worship, not in Gerizim, not even in Jerusalem. You shall worship the Lord. The Samaritan woman shall worship the Lord. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to preach. See, y'all got me preaching. The Samaritan. So, does Job? Okay. It said, but stretch forth your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said, saying, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Okay. So when we go over to the legends of the Jedis, written by Louis Ginsburg in 1909, and I'm in chapter 2, section 3, verse 24. And but before I go there, look at chapter 2, section 3, verse 27. This is about Job and Satan. It says, Job, however, was not perturbed by their words, because he divined at once that Satan stood behind his wife. And so these spirits were considered to be invisible to the naked eye, right? And it says, and seduced her to speak this thing. And his wife was working for another dude. She was like, Joe, just go and die already, would you? And here she was, like, on her hands and knees for some other dude, or something. I can't remember. According to Legends of the Jedi, 1909, Louis Ginsburg. It says, turning to the tempter, he said, why dost thou not meet me frankly? Give up thy underhand ways, thou wretch. Then Satan appeared before Job and admitted that he had been vanquished and went away abashed. Now, when we turn up to Colossians, which may be Deutero-Pauline, but it's based largely on Ephesians, which is a primary Pauline source. But it says here in Colossians 2, it says right here, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you are also raised with him through faith in powerful working of God who raised him from the dead, and you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. This is what I want you to focus on. Chapter 2, verse 15, Colossians. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. So here it says again in Legends of the Jedis 2:3-27. Thereupon Satan appeared before Job and admitted that he had been vanquished and went away abashed. And when we go up to 24, a few verses earlier, or paragraphs rather, because he's quite long-winded, dissatisfied with the result, Satan disguised himself as the king of Persia. This is the same dude who like if you go up earlier, he disguised as Lilith, who was also the Queen of Sheba. Yes, the Queen of Sheba is Lilith, right? And dang, I lost my spot. All right. So Lilith, Queen of Sheba, who we know from First Kings, was married to Solomon. But they're going to talk about how he was the most powerful dude, Solomon, but he was married to these other women, right? Like Samson, right? Like Ezra told them not to do. And that's because they believe in this kind of holy seed, right? And they are eating these bodies, and these bodies are eaten by their Lord. Their Lord had a sacrifice in Basra, right? And he comes up out of Basra washed white. Jesus, who had no sin, is washed white by trotting through the winepress, right? But what does he say? What's he say? He's the grapes. Jesus is the grapes that got the wrath, right? They don't even talk about Edom. They don't even talk about Edom in hey Faith. Hey, thank you for coming. I feel so blessed by your presence. Thank you so much. I can't wait till we can get together. We can go to that Yankee Air Museum or whatever they got in Ipsy or something. That would be fun. Thank you so much for coming. So that so Jesus' blood, this is the sacrifice of man, but this particular one is different. This is God showing out of his providence, um, Jehovah Jireh, that man sacrificed, but I'm talking about man, like Ishi, Jesse, son of Jesse, I'm not talking about these beasts or whatever. I'm talking about the good, the good man, the blessed man, right? And this is people that could eat the honey, like Samson, or David, without losing their own life, right? And so, when it comes to Isaiah chapter 34, or chapter 30. So we have chapter 30 here. I gotta go here in a second, so let me just run through a few verses in Isaiah, and then I'll tie it up some other kind of way in the future. But I just want to show you what they call beasts. It says, therefore, this is about Egypt, Isaiah 30. Therefore shall the protection of the Pharaoh turn to you your shame, and the shelter in the shadow of Egypt to your humiliation. For though his officials are at Zone and his envoy reaches Hanes, everyone comes to shame through a people cannot profit them, that brings neither help nor profit, but shame and disgrace. An oracle on the beasts of Negeb. It says beasts here. It says oracle on the beasts of Negeb, and this is these are boundaries. These is where, how Samson had carried, the boundaries up to their boundaries or whatever. So it says, through a land of trouble and anguish, from where come the lioness and the lion, the adder and the flying fiery serpent. It says here, the flying fiery serpent. They carry their riches. So this being the beasts, they carry the riches. So the beasts carry the riches on the backs of donkeys. The beasts do carry the riches, the ones in the land of the flying fiery serpent, carry their riches on the backs of donkeys and treasures on the humps of camels. To a people that cannot profit them, Egypt's help is worthless and empty. Therefore, I have called her Rahab, who sits still. The serpent that sits still. This is Egypt. But there are marginal people in Israel that are Rechabites, people of the old way before the hill people came down. And these were, you have the Rechabites who, according to Jeremiah 35, had the law that their father got from Jethro's descendants, whom Jonadab, who was getting drunk with Amnon, and he assaulted his sister. And so what you have here is a guy who repented, so he is one who is inwardly righteous. Inwardly, like he's not going to have a role in being a light into the nations per se by having all these marks or whatever, but still a righteous dude. Their father and the people there following him. And so whatever happens to the nations. It says here, let's see. So it says, and the streams of Edom shall be turned into pitch, and her soil into us. So this Edom is mankind, right? But this is who Jesus, if you rearrange his letters, is the same as Esau. So it says, and the streams of Edom shall be turned to pitch, and her soil into sulfur, and her land shall be a burning pitch. Night and day shall not be quenched. Its smoke shall go up forever. And generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. But the hawk and the porcupine shall possess it. And we can see in Jeremiah these things about Judah. So anything we see here in the next couple of chapters about Hezekiah isn't true for anybody but Jerusalem, and doesn't ultimately hold true for Jerusalem either. But because God is the people, according to them in Ezra, that when they go into this other land, that, as it says in the Quran, that they believe that this is the Son of God here, that God has gone with them. God has gone with them to exile. As Ezekiel said, the God's present went to the east. He's just waiting for them to get out there. Come on, guys, we're going into exile. And so it says, but the hawk and the porcupine shall possess it, the owl and the raven shall dwell in it. He shall stretch the line of confusion over it, and plumb line of emptiness. And this is about the borders, the tovu va vofu, or something like that in Hebrew. And so, or I would say wa instead of va, because I think that's Yiddish when they put the bas and the vas and the was and the vas and the bas. That is, they make the bas vas and the was bas or vas, or yeah, who knows. Ba 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 ba. Blue moon, blue moon, blue moon. Saw you standing alone. So it says here, if you stretch down past 13, 14, it says 14, and the wild animals shall meet the hyenas, and the wild goat shall cry his fellow. Indeed, there the night bird settles and finds her place a resting. So if we go to the Hebrew, and if you look at the end of that verse 14, it says, there Shem Lilith, the nocturnal creature. So it had said earlier, all these hawks and dogs and stuff in the prior verses, a female night demon is how they're translating it. Now, these demons are supposed to be principalities, and they are supposed to have infinite spirit. And this is what Jesus he was dealing with, spiritual level kind of stuff. And so these evil sons of God could be called the princes, like in Daniel. You have these Prince of Persia, or as it says in Legend of the Jedi, King of Persia. And these people each have their own, they're like guardian angels for nations, right? And the one of all of mankind, the equivalent of Shekinah, the dark Shekinah, is something manifest on Earth. So I missed some spots in Legends of the Jedi I forgot to mention, where they talk about from the Earth, and parts of Hebrews. So from the earth, you have these things that are born of spirit that are dark, as the antithesis. And so it says, will settle. Uh, oh, I was thinking about it in 11, verse 11. So if we go to verse 11, it says, the great owl and the raven, will dwell, Yashikana. And I told you what this yod is will. I keep on telling you all that. And Shekinah, the Shekinah. So this is the Shekinah of these owls and ravens, perhaps. So these are pterodactyl kind of thingy. That's the equivalent of the Rahab, and the which is the Leviathan, and the behemoth of the land. So you have skyland and sea, and so you have this this Shekinah of. So they have the stretch over his hand. It says the Shekinah will stretch over his hand across all of this Edom, which is mankind, and they'll have a measuring line of chaos, that's tohu, and wa bohu, destruction. All right, so with me, goodbye. See you later.